let's start with the first. Does Hamas have rockets? Now, when I conjure up in my mind a rocket, I conjure up something pretty tall, pretty impressive, and pretty destructive. That's a rocket in my mind. Maybe I have a quaint imagination, but that's what I see. So now let's use some simple, common sense. Gaza has been under an airtight blockade for 7 years. Israel doesn't let anything into Gaza that can be remotely used for military purposes. That's fact number one. Now, some of you are thinking, aha, he's deceiving us. What about those tunnels that Hamas has built or dug between Egypt and Gaza? Fair enough, it was a sophisticated tunnel economy, and probably military or militarily related material was smuggled in. I don't doubt that. I have no problem with that. But then, whatever they managed to smuggle in, they exhausted in November 2012 during Operation Pillar of Defense. Operation Pillar of Defense ends at the end of November. 7 months later is the coup in Egypt. The first thing Sisi did after the coup was blow up all the tunnels. He blew up the estimate about 95% of the tunnels. Nothing could get into Gaza. Nothing for the last year. So, where did these rockets come from? Where was the material to make them? As now is freely admitted, all of these rockets were homemade by Hamas with barely any materials. The reason these Hamas rockets have caused all of 3 Israeli casualties, civilian casualties, all of 3 Israeli civilian casualties, it's because they're not rockets. They're closer to firecrackers than rockets. Now, some of you may say, aha, Finkelstein is deceiving us again, because we all know that miracle of miracles, Iron Dome. These are very efficient rockets, but that miracle of miracles, Iron Dome, managed to knock them out of the sky. Okay, what's the facts behind that? Number one, the top person in the world in this particular area of research is Theodore Postel at MIT. Postel was the first person to expose the nonsense about the Patriot anti-missile system during the 1991 so-called, the first Gulf War. At the time, they were saying the Patriot anti-missile system was 80%, 90% effective, for those of you who remember. What did it turn out? It turned out that maybe one Scud missile was deflected by the Patriot anti-missile defense system. And that was revealed about a year or 2 after the first Gulf War by Theodore Postel. Well, Postel was then asked recently, in the last month, it has to be the last 2 weeks, he was asked, well, what about Iron Dome? What is its efficiency? He put its efficiency, I'm quoting him, at 5%. 5%. It's not Iron Dome that's deflecting these humongous rockets. What's deflecting them is they're not rockets in the first place. Now, how do we know that? There's such a simple way to know that. If you use your brain for half a minute, just use your brain. Operation Cast Lead, 2008 to 9. It lasted 22 days. How many civilian casualties were there in Israel? Does anyone know? There were 3. Operation Protective Edge. It's lasted now 22 days. How many civilian casualties in Israel? 3. Operation Cast Lead, before Iron Dome. Operation Protective Edge, after the Iron Dome. What's the rational conclusion? Iron Dome did zilch. That's the rational conclusion. In fact, the rockets now being used by Hamas are much more primitive than the ones they used in 2008-9, because at that point they had managed to smuggle something in. Now it's nothing. Well, now Mr. Netanyahu has a problem. He boasted so much about the efficiency of Iron Dome, this miracle of miracles, that the only conclusion you could draw of it's so efficient, this work of genius by the geniuses of all geniuses, the Israelis, only they could come up with such a brilliant contraption. If it's so efficient, then why are you killing all these Gazans? If it's so efficient, none of your civilians are being killed save 3, then why do you have to carry on like maniacs and lunatics in Gaza? So he has a problem. And he comes up with a new pretext. That's why the New York Times has people like Isabel Kirshner. She's there to just copy out anything the New York Times hands her. Excuse me, anything that the Israeli consulate has her. And even there, the difference is only a fleece hop. So what do? They come up with a new idea. The reason we're attacking Gaza, because rockets, so to speak, don't fly anymore. The reason we're attacking Gaza is because of the tunnels. And day in and day out, they keep saying this whole operation is because of the tunnels. And that's supposed to explain to rational people why Israel is doing what it's doing. It's not the rockets anymore, it's the tunnels. So, when an Israeli naval vessel kills 4 kids on the beach playing soccer, it's because of the tunnels. And when Israel targets Al-Wafa Hospital, why? It's because of the tunnels. Even though nobody even claimed there were tunnels underneath the hospital. And when Israel targeted Al-Shifa Hospital and also targeted the playground nearby, well, it's obvious why they did that. It's the tunnels. And day in and day out, you keep hearing about the tunnels, as if the tunnels can in any way rationally explain why Israel's precision weapons are constantly killing kids and targeting manifestly civilian sites. Well, you could say Israel is doing it, since it's obviously not the tunnels. You could say Israel is doing it because it's a lunatic state. It's a state that's gone over the cliff. And I myself have to acknowledge that on more than one occasion I've said as much. I think it's a crazy state. It's not a failed state, it's a crazy state. But there's still, to use the Shakespearean expression, there is a method in the madness, and it's not difficult to discern. Number one, when Israel launched Operation Cast Lead in 2008-9, the orders that were given to the Israeli combat forces, the orders were blast everything in sight because we don't want combatant casualties. Israel is in many ways a reverse of conventional societies. In most societies, they tolerate combatant casualties much more than they're willing to tolerate civilian casualties. Israel is a different kind of society. It's a kind of Spartan society in which military or combatant casualties are a source of much greater anguish and torment than civilian casualties. So the first rule is combatants aren't supposed to get killed. And so in Operation Cast Lead in 2008-9, if you read the orders that were given, a lot of it was published, it was if you see a building in the distance, you don't ask any questions. You demolish everything in sight, so there will be nobody to even take a sniper shot at you. So one of the reasons was to demolish everything in sight, and that can explain some of what Israel has been doing now. So in Shujaya, the biggest massacre to date, in Shujaya, it was freely admitted. They said, we leveled the place because if we had to go in street by street fighting with the Hamas militants, we would have had to absorb a large number of combatant casualties, and so they wiped the whole place out. It wasn't only because of that. The other reason was the day before, 7 Israeli soldiers had been killed, and it became a kind of revenge operation that partly explained it. But that's not the larger part of the explanation, because contrary to what you might conceive, there hasn't been a ground invasion. It's not true. There has been an occupation a couple of miles into the border. It's only on the border area for the reason I mentioned to you already. There was and is a fear that if they were to conduct a real ground invasion deep into Gaza, they are, because they still might, but at this point, there's the fear that they will suffer some significant combat losses. And so they're holding back. They're still at the border. So if they're still at the border and it's not to protect combatants, why are they doing it? Why have they seemingly gone mad? And there the reason has been completely acknowledged by Israelis if you read it. Number one, it won't surprise anyone in this room, they're hoping that a terror bombing will bring Palestinians and Palestinian Gazans to their knees. They're hoping that you'll destroy everything in sight, there's a humanitarian ceasefire, the people come out, they see there is nothing, and then they say, then let's have a ceasefire and let's end it, because the devastation is so terrible. And the longer-term goal is they hope that with all the death and destruction, people will eventually blame Hamas for what happened and will then seek to unseat Hamas. And in fact, that was the calculation during Operation Cast Lead as well. And there was some truth to it. The people of Gaza stood behind the resistance in 2008-9, but then a significant element of alienation entered when the people of Gaza asked themselves, for what? All of this death, Israel left behind 600,000 tons of rubble after Operation Cast Lead. All of the death, all of the destruction, the blockade was still there. So there was a feeling of Hamas got us into a mess. I don't think that's accurate, but that's what Israel's hoping will again happen this time. That's the purpose behind the terror bombing. And we should be clear about one point. There should be no doubt on one critical point. A couple of days ago, I got so I couldn't take it anymore. 20 days in front of the computer watching this thing unfold, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you begin to go mad. And my friend Sarah Roy, some of you may know her from Harvard, who lived in Gaza, knows the people and has a heart. She's a very decent human being. She sent an email to me, not to me personally, to her people, describing the attack on the playground, another kid just blown to fragments. And Sarah's a very smart person, and she's an elegant person. She's a distinguished scholar, comes from a impressive family. Her mother was a survivor of Auschwitz. And then the last line in the email said, "I want to vomit. I want to vomit." And that just struck a chord with me. No fancy language, no rhetorical curlicues. I want to vomit by the way Israel's carrying on in Gaza. So I decided it was time to do something. I can't justify in my own mind just sitting in front of a computer. So I decided, okay, let's organize some sitting, get arrested. I don't know what I'll do, but I want to do something. And so I said, let's do it in front of the Israeli consulate, Israeli mission to the UN. And after I announced it, I went to bed, and I'm thinking in my bed, you know, Norm, you kind of made an error here. Why are you attacking the US mission? Excuse me, why are you attacking the Israeli mission? Who was the enabler? Who allowed it to happen? Every day that pedantic, pontificating, insipid president, every day, no, it's a fact. Let's not kid ourselves. Every single day that man came out and said, Israel has the right to defend itself, each time he said it, he was giving Israel the green light to continue the massacre. That's a fact. Were it not for him, that could not have happened. And it's a very odd thing. There are people here, not many, but there are people here whose memories go back to 1982, the Israeli massacre in Lebanon then. How many people remember it? Raise your hand. Okay, some. It's a very strange thing, but facts are facts, and we have to acknowledge them. During the Israeli massacre in Lebanon in 1982, and that was quite a shindig, Israel killed between 15 and 20,000 Palestinian and Lebanese, overwhelmingly civilians, in those 3.5 months. But during the massacre, at one point, President Reagan, that brain-dead monster, President Reagan, at one point, he had this picture of a child. How many people remember? A child who was a victim of the Israeli attack in Lebanon. And he took the picture of the child who had been severely targeted, severely burnt, and put it on his desk. And then the prime minister at the time, Menachem Begin, he embarked on one of his lunatic jihads. He was going to prove that child was not targeted by Israel. And so a kind of little war of images, whatever you want to call it, in the stupid postmodern language, a war of narratives, whatever that means, went on between Prime Minister Begin and President Reagan. But the fact of the matter is, if we want to be truthful to ourselves, Ronald Reagan showed more heart than Barack Obama to what's happening in Gaza. Well,